Welcome to the Brilliant Fertility Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Rose, and this podcast exists to help illuminate the path ahead of you. With expert interviews, clinical pearls, and real client success stories, my intention is to bring you hope for what's possible on this journey and to give you tools and resources to navigate the ups and downs on the road before you. If you find this podcast helpful, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite listening platform. And I have a big request. If you have a minute, can you leave us a 5-star review? And let us know, what did you learn? What did you come away with? Did you leave with that spark of hope? This helps more people like you find the podcast. My mission is to support as many humans as possible on their path to become parent. And by you sharing and subscribing, you're part of that mission too. And I'm so grateful for you for being here. Welcome back to the Brilliant Fertility Podcast. I am fresh off of having a conversation with one of our Brilliant Fertility Program members, and so they're on my mind. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, involving triggers, is of course inspired and informed by the people I've worked with in the Brilliant Fertility Program and the ways in which we have navigated triggers. So let's dive in here, because this conversation around triggers can be uncomfortable. And us humans, we don't like to be uncomfortable. and hopefully we can all laugh a little bit about that. But the reality is that feeling our feelings is hard. And when we are triggered, whether that's because you go to an event and you weren't expecting someone to announce their pregnancy, or it's an old standing trigger involving family relationships, this happens because there is a wound, right? And being asked to look at that wound is challenging. It's uncomfortable. And we weren't born with some step-by-step manual on how to deal with these. So I first just want to start off by hopefully being able to open up a pathway of self-compassion and grace around feeling triggered. We're always doing the best we can. One of the principles that I learned about in my hypnotherapy training is that the unconscious mind is always doing the best with the resourcing that it has. So if you experience a situation in which you feel triggered, there is a part of you that developed that way of responding out of necessity. And it's an opportunity to do things differently. There's a choice involved here. And when we have choice, this also opens up opportunities. So where do we begin here? What is that triggered state? What causes it? It may present to you in different forms, but most commonly, people will experience some level of reactivity, and that can manifest as tension in the body. It could manifest as feeling like you're going to cry. It could feel like this overwhelming anger, frustration, jealousy is typically witnessed or considered as a negative experience. But because we believe here in my world that there's no such thing as a negative emotion, I would like to invite you to look at this as a compass. And when your compass is flickering, it's showing you something and asking you to witness a part of you that wants to heal. That's what ultimately a trigger is. But it's this charge that we feel. And it can happen really quickly, especially if we haven't previously accumulated or developed or learned resourcing to pause. So, pausing can be an initial way of acknowledging a trigger. What happens when you experience this, especially if you're in a setting where you feel like deer in the headlights, like I can't escape. You're at a party, you're at a gathering, you're in a public place where it doesn't feel like you can escape. But let's talk about 3 ways that you can manage a trigger in real time. And then we'll also be talking about neutralizing triggers over the long run. So if you're in that setting where you initially feel that intense charge, it is usually going to be okay to say, like, oh gosh, I got to step away and use the restroom. And even if it's a situation where all you have is a bathroom stall, being able to spend 90 seconds of just being present to the sensation that you feel in your body when you acknowledge a triggered state. You don't even have to necessarily be able to talk about it or name the emotion yet, but just being able to stay present and say, like, oh my God, I feel so much tightness in my chest. My eyeballs feel so much pressure with this desire to just sob. Can you spend 90 seconds just breathing with it, letting go of the need to judge yourself for it or to push away how uncomfortable that is? And maybe you even tell yourself, this feels like a lot right now. I'm not quite sure how to navigate this. I don't think I can go deeply into this in this moment. I may need to set this aside to come back to. That 90 seconds gives space. And especially if you feel like you can just be with it, it gives that charge a path to start to neutralize. May not be fully neutralized in that moment, especially if this is a trigger that is ongoing. If this is, every time you see this friend, they say something absolutely judgmental or ridiculous. The same family member that tends to bring things up, or maybe it's a common trigger of someone announcing their pregnancy or saying something ridiculous about, you got pregnant on the first try. We may need to come back to it. But that 90 seconds, if you can set that timer, breathe, feel where you feel it. This part 1, I would say, is set your timer for 90 seconds. Part 2 would be that feel where you feel it in the body, identify where you feel that. This is the bit of somatic practice that is really important when it comes to emotional processing. I'm going to be honest, part of the reason I don't love traditional talk therapy, it feels very unproductive to me. I'm not a patient person. I also don't believe that we need to be totally patient. And that might go against what some people believe about fertility, is like, you just have to be patient. It's going to happen when it happens, blah, blah, blah. But there are a lot more effective tools. And so when it comes to processing emotions, somatic work, somatic experiencing, somatic exercises are really potent ways of validating, feeling, allowing it to run through in such a way that you don't necessarily have to talk in circles about the trigger. And the first step is just being able to give yourself a little space. And the second step is just identifying simply where you feel it and then breathing with it. So if I had to really condense down this process, 1, set your timer for 90 seconds. 2, identify where in the body you feel it. 3, breathe for 90 seconds. And just notice what shifts. Does that charge start to dissipate? If it started at a 10, are you down to a 7? And from there, if you notice that you are frequently triggered, if you notice that you're not able to enjoy things that you used to enjoy or people that you used to enjoy, it's okay to ask for help. A lot of the people I work with tend to be hyper independent, super high achievers, may label themselves as type A or perfectionist. And while that may have gotten you to a certain point in life, to a certain level of achievement, maybe in your career or in other areas, when it comes to fertility and when it comes to neutralizing triggers, this way of being, of, charging through life all on your own, doing everything by yourself, this is also an invitation to look at how could I be supported differently. You might go back and listen to the episode I did about the 3 characteristics of my most successful clients. And one of them is finding their community, not doing this alone. We don't have to neutralize our triggers alone. There's so much loneliness already on the fertility journey. And when you can find a person who is in your corner, a practitioner who is rooting for you and who can help you gather the tools, and finding other people who are on a similar path and have that high intention of wanting to step into this most fertile identity and learn how to unconditionally love and accept themselves. Like, this is a game changer. This really magnifies all of the intention, all of that energetic vibe of healing. And it's okay if you might have to search around a little bit and you go through a couple people first who don't feel like a good fit. I'll be honest, I've been through, I don't know, a few therapists in my entire lifetime. I'm a big fan of therapy. I think everyone, the whole world would be better off if everyone went to therapy. And not every therapist is going to be a good fit, and not every style of therapy is going to be a good fit. So if you find yourself frustrated in your therapy work with your practitioners, being able to communicate with them, feeling safe to communicate with them is important. Sometimes the frustration is just our own resistance to change, and that can be navigated. Sometimes it is, like for me, it was just honestly lack of patience. Like, I don't like to talk in circles about problems. I like solutions. I like things feeling like they are coming to a resolution versus just like, yeah, okay, I've told this story before. I know what I feel around it. How do I get rid of the feeling? And it's not so much about getting rid of, it's about, allowing yourself to fully feel, process, and release. So I like somatic tools. I love tapping. I like somatic experiencing, breath work when done with the proper facilitation, and even tools that might be seemingly more aggressive, like microdosing, ketamine assisted therapy. Like, these are, getting more and more research under them to understand how they help in the rewiring of the brain, because ultimately releasing a trigger, neutralizing a trigger involves a certain rewiring of a neural pathway that for a long, long time, or because of several intense moments, that pathway is strong. And when we're rewiring the brain to neutralize triggers, we are essentially breaking down one neural pathway to strengthen or sometimes entirely build a new pathway. So when we have, neurons firing on neurons and we want that pathway to get stronger, it's going to take some practice, or it's going to take some more, intense way, essentially, of building that pathway. Okay, so I kind of just sped right into that. I am very curious for you guys who are listening, how you might experience a trigger, what tools you currently feel like you have to support yourself in the immediate sense of feeling a trigger, and then what the long-term resources are that you have for moving through that. I also want to talk about how helpful it can be to become aware of our triggers and begin to work through them in the preconception phase, because this is an element of conscious conception. A lot of people assume initially that once they get pregnant, that old trigger is going to go away. That trigger of, someone else getting pregnant easily or announcing their pregnancy. And unfortunately, that's not really true. They might shift, and the trigger itself might change, like what the initial presentation was. And there's nothing like pregnancy after infertility or pregnancy after miscarriage, or early parenting at any point, to just dredge up all the triggers in a new way. For example, a common experience in the Brilliant Fertility Program, usually within each cohort, we'll have a few people who conceive while we're active in that 4 months. And that can pose a challenge because, of course, like all of these women and couples have been in the trenches together, and they've talked about their triggers and they've talked about how hard this is. And then someone might get pregnant and actually feel almost a survivor's guilt. Like, oh my gosh, like I'm so happy for myself. I'm so excited. I'm so relieved. And I'm so sad for these people who I've been with for months, moving through this process. And I want that for them too. And I'm afraid to talk about it because I don't want to trigger them, because I know what they've been through. This is all nuanced. This is all complex. We're all human. And it is very normal for triggers to present in a new way during that phase. I believe that when we all are coming from good intentions and unconditional love for ourselves and love for our fellow humans, that even though it might be messy, it might be clunky, like we can work through this. And then when we get into parenthood, there is nothing like a small human to mirror back anything that we feel inadequate around, any triggers that we may have, any feelings or emotions that we weren't allowed to experience in childhood, often present at that time when a child is throwing a tantrum. And it's like, oh shit, like I wasn't allowed to experience that. So I'm really uncomfortable with this child experiencing this. So how do I shut that down? Like, how do I get away from this discomfort? Like that's maybe a more common example of what I witness in, myself. I've worked through that one, but what I witnessed in myself early on, and then, what comes up for my patients who are experiencing secondary infertility, for example. So being able to work through a lot of that now in the preconception phase, whether you've been through infertility or you are just starting out thinking about what your pregnancy or parenthood journey might look like and you haven't even started trying yet, there's always opportunity for building that awareness and starting this work and healing in a very conscious way that sets you up for just an even more loving parenting journey. All right. I think I've gotten to the end of my little cliff notes, and I always go on tangents, but I'm here for you. And remember, there's nothing wrong with you for experiencing a sense of being triggered or experiencing a charge. We're all human. If you can take 90 seconds to feel where you feel it, to breathe with it, that may just start to dissipate that charge. And having the courage to reach out for help, to find your community, so that you can have just an experience of being able to live life more fully. You know, when we're always running away from our triggers, it's like we're going to put up walls, we're going to start to feel numb, we're going to start to shut things out. And I want all of you to be able to live life as fully and as deeply and as beautifully as we can. And sometimes that means really being with our hurt and being with our feelings. And when we can feel that and allow ourselves to feel safe to feel it and find the places to feel safe and the people to feel safe with, we will also be able to experience more joy, more love, more fun, more celebrations. And it's not to say all of it gets easier, but in some ways it does. In some ways it does feel more natural to be able to experience all of it more fully. All right, I'm going to sign off now before I just fully start to go into my feels. And I am headed off to an annual conference that I am just so excited about and I love. So I don't want to ruin my makeup right now. But I am going to link in our notes for today a couple of resources. We have our EFT tapping for getting through the holidays. We have our 5 quick and easy tools for nervous system regulation. And because I've gotten a lot of questions about this conference that I go to in the past, this is Business by Design Live. It's a huge meeting of online entrepreneurs. And a lot of the wisdom that comes through in the Brilliant Fertility Program, I've actually taken so much of that from my entrepreneurship journey. Like, entrepreneurship can be extremely lonely, and there's so many parallels to the fertility journey that, gosh, like I didn't realize when I set out on this path. So this conference is put on by James Wedmore. He has one of my favorite podcasts. I'm going to link that in the show notes because I know we've got some entrepreneurs here or some people who have thought about starting their own businesses. And this is just another really helpful resource. His podcast is very similar in many ways to how I approach fertility, is that it's not just about your strategy. It's not just about what you're doing. It is about who are you being, and the mental, emotional, spiritual aspects of that and how that plays out in business. There's just so many parallels. It's kind of funny. So I am wishing you guys such a wonderful week. I'm sending you so much love. And if you could take a moment to leave a review for the podcast, leave a rating. This is so helpful for getting this in front of more people. And my mission, of course, is to help as many people as possible have a healthy pregnancy, have as healthy a child as possible, and also really feel as if you are stepping into the identity of the person who you want to be. All right, take care and see you next week.